with that. Hold on a sec. Sorry.
No problem. Welcome to the 8th edition of Stories in Living Color. I'm Rick Roberts, representing the Storytelling Association of California, the producer of this project. We conceived and formed Stories in Living Color with the goal of starting conversations between storytellers of different colors and from different cultures. These storytellers are modeling the first step of what our society must do to move towards inclusiveness and away from racism and discrimination, because the first step is to talk about it. Those of us who are the beneficiaries of systemic racism especially need to engage in these conversations. I woke up this morning having had advantages over people of color from the day that I was born, and I will continue to have advantages tomorrow, the next day, and for the rest of my life. And while I often find it difficult to talk about this, all of us talking about it, writing about it, singing about it, and telling stories about it is the only way that we can come to the point when one day, perhaps my grandchildren will wake up in a truly just and equal society. Tonight's MC is Kader Abdi, coming to us from Virginia. He is a storyteller, a stand-up comedian, and an improviser. Kader is multilingual in Somali, Arabic, and English, and he is currently learning how to swim. Given his other accomplishments, I expect that Kader will soon be swimming laps around the rest of us. Before I bring on Kader, however, I'd like to tell you about two upcoming Stories in Living Color events. We will be holding a panel discussion during the upcoming National Storytelling Network's online conference in late July. That discussion will allow us to do a deep dive into the project and let folks know much more about its origin, its goals, and its future. And in September, our online event will be dedicated to stories about the mass incarceration of Americans, mainly people of color. We will have storytellers who have volunteered in prisons, as well as tellers who were formerly incarcerated. And it will be a benefit for organizations that are working towards the end of life without parole sentences and working towards radical reform of the prison system. We'll let you know about these email events, we'll let you know about the events by email. And now, without further ado, please welcome our MC, Kader Abdi.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be the host of the 8th edition of Story in Living Colors. I would like to start by thanking you, the audience, for trusting us with your time and allowing us to be a part of your evening. Please use the chat box. Tell us who you are and where you're coming from. We have storytellers from across the country. Some of us are in Boston, some of us in Virginia, Maryland, and Sacramento. So we have a global show. We are very lucky to be able to get together thanks to the internet and absorb these amazing stories. So please use the chat box to cheer on the storytellers and save your questions for the Q&A box at the end of the show. We will make sure to answer all of your questions. Without further ado, please, all the storytellers, turn your cameras on. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have four well-established, amazing storytellers. The first pair are Gloria and Andrew, and the theme of their story is assumptions and consequences. And the second pair, Janice and Andrea, and the theme of their stories is life, death, and hope. Please, we have a great show. We have amazing work. These people worked hard together for many weeks to produce this quality material. Also, I would like you to know that the story in living color, we allow the storytellers to present their identity, their ideas, what they believe in. We do not control or manage their content. We allow them to be who they are, and that's what makes this show unique. So please, all the storytellers except Gloria, turn your cameras off. Our first storyteller is the amazing Gloria. She is a retired school teacher, a mother of 3, and a grandmother of 5. Gloria is an established artist. She wrote and performed plays in the Sacramento area. Also, Gloria is a talented writer. She published 2 books. Her latest book is titled The Jacket, a story of life from the jacket's point of view. Her book is available in ebook format and on Amazon, and soon it will be available in paperback and audiobook. And you can see the cover of her amazing book. I recommend all of you to go get this book and enjoy. Gloria's story tonight is called Consequences. So please, Gloria, take it away.
Thank you, Kadir. From the womb, my mother entered this life gently, with a soft heart and a kind visage on the world. Now, on the other hand, my rollout wasn't so smooth. It was a bit more rugged, a little less trusting. And the longer I have lived in this place, the more wary I have become. Now, although my mother had faith in the basic goodness of mankind, by no means was she blind to the seeds of evil that sometimes sprouted among us. And while the victims of those seeds suffered painful and sometimes very long-lasting consequences, there were seldom consequences that we could see for those who sowed the seeds. I recall my mother taking hot rolls to a woman who lived up the street from us. The woman lived alone and she seldom left her home. She was a bit of a hermit. And when she did venture out, well, we kids in the neighborhood were not totally convinced that she wasn't really a witch. I mean, she certainly looked the part, kind of wild-eyed and bent over and not terribly clean. But my mother realized that life had not been kind to her, and her reaction to life's harshness and evil was one that we as children needed to see, to understand, and to meet with compassion whenever we could. My mom was born knowing what I was born needing to know. Again and again, I witnessed the consequences to us of harshness and bigotry against us. In those days, we used to take our shoes to be repaired at the shoe shop in town. You know, back those days, they would resole the shoes. On one such visit, when I was very young, I went with my older sister to take our shoes to be repaired. But the white gentleman who owned the shop took that opportunity to sexually molest my sister as I stood there looking on. The police advised us when they were told to probably just keep her away from his shop in the future. There were no consequences for him, but for us, the consequences were an understanding that our safety and our self-respect did not matter, but that our suffering would be long. As I grew up, and began to understand the repercussions of wearing my Black skin in this world, as I learned our history in America, where I wondered are the consequences for those who set up and perpetuate a system that speaks of justice for all, but actually doles out injustice for so many, so often. When we live with the stereotypes and the ideas of supremacy, we must constantly remind ourselves of our value and that we matter, no matter what this culture throws at us. You see, now later in life, when my mother was a senior herself, she joined a program for calling elderly people who were lonely and in need of someone to talk to. Now, even in old age, my mom had many friends, but her heart went out to those who were alone, folks who were not so blessed. And she had really lots of very positive conversations with her lonely phone friends until the kind of idea of default entered into the picture. You see, if the voice on the other end of such a phone call is pleasing and its diction is correct, its owner is assumed to be white. And laboring under this assumption, one of her sweet little old ladies unloaded on the subject of African Americans and her feelings about our worth and our untrustworthiness. My mother listened. She offered the suggestions that there were good and bad people of all stripes. I asked my mom, I said, Mom, did you tell that woman that you were Black? She laughed. She had not. She continued her calls to the old woman, though. The lady was certain that Mom was white, and that was a comfort to her, a comfort my mother did not disturb. She had no need to demean others or to upset them in the smallness they held dear. I watched my husband endure similar circumstances as director of housing at a large university. Quite often, he had parents on the phone complaining to them that their child was assigned to a dorm room with an undesirable, read Black or Latino roommate. I'm calling to find out what I need to do to change my child's roommate. She's been placed with some Black girl, and that's completely inappropriate. And I'm concerned for her welfare. I'm sure you understand. Feeling free to disgorge their feelings about the type of child who shared the room, they laid bare their ideas of superiority and inferiority, confident that the director would, of course, agree and understand because they took for granted that the person holding that title was white, that it should be a white man's job. Thus, they automatically assumed my husband would appreciate their concern about their child being placed with a Black student. My husband always responded professionally, telling the fearful parents that it was not the policy of the university to remove roommates simply on the grounds of race. My husband is strong in his confidence of who he is. Lifting my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help, and I hope my answers, I was asking prayer. Lord, where are the consequences? Where are the consequences for those, for their creation and protection of such a culture? Now, one of my favorite things to do is to read, because a good book can bring healing when I need it. I decided to read Michelle Obama's book, Becoming, and what a lovely story it was. As I settled myself, smiling at the good times and feeling empathy at the bad, then I came to the part where Michelle attended Princeton. She shared the nervousness and the desire to fit in. She also shared that her roommate's mother made one of those calls, the kind of calls my husband used to get. I don't want my daughter rooming with that Black girl. Please move her. God, Father of wisdom, editor of our impressions, showed me in his way one of the consequences of that twisted approach. The blessings we miss, the growth we experience. That woman missed the opportunity to say, my daughter roomed with the first lady in college. They became great friends, and I'm so happy to be invited to the White House with her. And in many ways, it may seem to be a small consequence, but it is a consequence nonetheless. As I move through life, I try to be there for others who, like the old lady who lived up the street, to whom my mother shared her roles, I have been helping those who have been damaged by our culture and by the bad seeds within it. Although I'm grateful to have had a mother who was gentle and who taught me to have compassion on those for whom consequences of racism and sexism have been dire, I seek a day where the consequences for selling cigarettes are not death. The consequences for the rape of an inebriated woman are not erased by one's prowess on a swim team, where the consequence for being a 12-year-old boy with a toy gun should not be assassination on sight. In other words, for this country, I would like it to be a predisposition for gentleness and long suffering optional, not a requirement for survival in communities of color or for women, a place where those in power do not measure their own humanity by their ability to treat others inhumanely. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for your amazing story. Please, all your listeners, go ahead and order the jacket and an ebook available on Amazon. It will be soon available as a paperback and an audiobook. Thank you, Gloria, for the powerful story. Now you can turn your camera off, and I would like to invite Andrew to come on. Yes, thank you, Andrew. Andrew is our next storyteller of tonight. He is a man of many talent. He is a storyteller, a poet, and he is the president of Sacramento Storytellers Guild. He is an author and a publisher, and he published the well-received book Papa Loafer's Stories, a positive reflection of life in America. His book consists of 183 stories. 13 of them are illustrated. The stories told by Andrew are adapted from his book, which can be found on Amazon. And I will add a fun little fact. Andrew is a gentleman farmer. His story tonight is called Graduation Day. Andrew, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Kader. So I'm in my fanciest shirt. I have on monogram cufflinks. I'm wearing a red power tie. I have on a pinstriped suit. My black shoes are buffed to perfection. I don't have a hair out of place. Not like I have a lot of hair, but I don't have a hair out of place. And I'm looking good as I'm flying into LAX one bright summer day in June 2018. I'm representing the Superintendent of Public Instruction at a graduation ceremony. The California School Age Consortium had a training program for administrators of color. Those administrators ran after-school programs, or what's called nowadays expanded learning programs. Wonderful programs. They had asked the superintendent to attend the graduation and speak, but he was unable to, so it fell on me to represent the superintendent and the Department of Education. So I get to my rental car and I punch in the address into Google, and off I go, expecting to go to a college or university somewhere where the graduation would likely be. So I was surprised when Google takes me down into the industrial area of Los Angeles. Suddenly I find myself among a bunch of warehouses and big pieces of equipment all over the place, and people with hard hats and carrying lunch buckets on the sidewalks, and I'm dressed to the nines, and everybody's kind of looking at me, if they notice me, I'm feeling a little bit out of place. Well, that was odd. So anyway, Google takes me to a warehouse. And I park there, and again, I'm looking around going, is this the right place? And I watched a couple of adults go into the warehouse, so I followed them. Well, sure enough, up on the second floor, that's where the graduation was. And it was beautifully set up. Round tables with white tablecloths and elegant silverware and crystal. And it was gorgeous. And I was warmly greeted by someone there, and I found my chair at a table. Well, as I'm looking around, I'm noticing again, I'm the only person in a tie and a suit. So I'm feeling like a duck out of water, again in this place. whatever. The ceremony begins. This first couple speakers were sponsors and advocates of the program, and they did a great job advocating for the expanded learning programs. And by the end of their speeches, everybody, the place was abuzz with purpose, and everybody was reaching into their wallets to give them some money to support the programs. It was great. The next two speakers were students chosen by their peers to represent the class. The first was a proud Latina who got up to say what she wanted her students to learn, that you never give up. You face the challenges that you're given and you go through them, you go around them, you go above them, but you never give up. You keep fighting. And that's the message she wanted to give her students. That's how she got to where she was. And that's the message she wanted her fellow graduates to give their students as well. The next graduate to get up was an African-American gentleman, tall, handsome. And his focus was on community. He wanted his students to understand that they could impact their community. They could develop their community by developing relationships and by supporting each other and having each other's back as a means to fight white privilege. He expanded on that theme a little bit more. He had some staff, and he wanted his staff to make sure that his students understood the challenges they might expect from white privilege. So it was really a great speech and right for the times. But I'm telling you, by the end of his speech, I was feeling pretty white. I was up next. I go up to the podium and I pause for a minute and I look, at the audience and at the graduates, and I'm one of 3 white people in the place. So as I look at the graduates, my mind is gripped with anxiety because I notice that each and every one of them is staring at me with a furrowed brow. It's like I'm thinking that they see this white guy up there who is just taking full advantage of white privilege to get where he is, right? It's like I'm beaming my whiteness out of this crowd. And I had prepared a speech. A good speech full of facts and figures all about expanded learning programs and after-school programs. And it just flew out of my mind. I'm looking at the graduates going, what am I going to tell these guys that's relevant to them? I wasn't prepared to address white privilege. But I had dealt with a lot of challenges in my life, probably that they were familiar with, and certainly some of their students were familiar with, so I improvised. I told them that I didn't even read a book until I was 18 years old. I couldn't read. I was practically illiterate in elementary school. My dad wanted me to go into the trades because he thought I was too lazy to go to school. He really didn't have a use for education. He wanted me to pass my classes to get a high school diploma. But all I had to do was get a C. And if I didn't pass, I got the belt. So that was my only motivation for going to school in high school. I hated every minute of high school. My buddies and I, we lived on the wrong side of the tracks. When we went to school, we were shunned by the core groups at the school. We hung out in the parking lot all day long, every day, for 4 years, smoking pot. That was our education. Simply put, high school was a waste of time for me. But here I am, talking to you guys, I told the graduates. How could that be? It could be because of 2 people just like you. 2 people who nudged me in the right direction to get me to see life a little bit differently so I could make better choices for myself. The first one was my mom. My mom started college when I was 5 years old. Now, I'm the youngest of 6 kids, and the oldest was 13. So she started college when I was 5. 8 years later, she got her doctorate in pharmacy. Incredible, no? So I held her in high esteem. And when she told me one day, she says, Andy, she goes, you've got what it takes to go to college. I glommed onto those words. No one had ever said that to me before. And then her husband, he was the other guy. Kent, his name was Kent. He was a college-educated man. He introduced me to the world of intellect and academia, a world that I didn't even know existed. It was because of that encouragement and that vision that led me to go in the direction of college. I started college. I had to take 2 extra years in junior college just to get the grade level because I wasted so much time in high school. And then my parents didn't have any money, so I had to work all the way through college. I had Pell Grants, I had student loans, and I worked part-time jobs all the way through 4 years of junior college and 2 years of university to get my bachelor's degree. I was the first male in my family to ever get a college degree. 10 years later, I went back and got a master's in public policy and administration, and that's why I was there today at this speech. But so by now, the graduates were beginning to understand how unlikely it was that I was even there that day. But I made sure to let them know that they are the pivotal people for their students. They are the ones that are going to show, encourage, and enlighten, and show those kids different ways to go. By the end of my speech, their faces had softened, and a few of them even had tears in their eyes. My speech of struggle and persistence resonated with them. Those graduates were committed to being a positive influence on their students. They were heroes, opening doors and possibilities for their students, providing them with the confidence they needed to succeed in life and make the right choices. It was such a great day. I was so happy to be there. So I was on my way home. I was on the plane. I was loosening my tie, and Nelson Mandela came to mind in a speech in 1990, I think at Madison Park High School. He said that education was the greatest weapon we can use to change the world. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much for this amazing story. Please find Papa Laughers Stories on Amazon. Thank you so much. Now you can turn your camera off. This is the part where I remind you all to use the chat box. We have so many beautiful people here, a total of 33 participants. We appreciate you being here. Please use the chat box to cheer on the storytellers, and use the Q&A box at the end of the show to ask any questions that you have. We have people from Fairfax, Virginia, we have people from Alaska, and we have people from all over this country. We are very lucky that you decided to share your evening with us. With that being said, I would like to invite the next pair of storytellers, Janice and Andrea. Please turn your cameras on. Thank you, thank you. Now, the next story is unique in nature because the story will be told by both amazing, talented, passionate storytellers. And the story will have an ebbs and flows, and it will flow between both of them. This is very exciting because this is the first time it's been done virtually, and I cannot wait because I watched these beautiful, talented ladies work so hard on getting the timing of this story. I will start by introducing Andrea. Andrea is a host, an MC, and a feature coordinator of the story space. She is a community volunteer, a youth leader, and a mother of 5. She is most proud of co-founding and running the Youth Standing Strong Camp, which serves kids and teenagers worldwide. On the other hand, we have the beautiful Janice. She's an author, a master storyteller, and an American griot, keeping the history and the culture of African diaspora alive. She is a past president and a lifelong member of the Griots Circle of Maryland and the National Association of Black Storytellers. Also, she has been a mentor for 13 years. She was mentoring the growing Griots literacy learning program. Finally, her poem, Black Women in Power, is featured in the book Dear Kamala, Women Write to the New Vice President. Commissioner Green serves on the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture. We are very lucky to have both of you. Janice, the stage is yours. I'm sorry to cut you off. You are on mute. Thank you.
I am 7 years old, and this is the most important day of my 7 years of life. Can you see my white dress? It has rows and rows and tiers of white lace. And the satin bow that goes around the waist, my mother has tied into a ginormous bow in the back. My white patent leather, Mary Jane's, shine like glass. And the lace stockings that I'm allowed to wear, they let my pretty brown legs show through. As I stand there putting my white satin gloves on, my mother comes up behind me and she places the crown and glory on my head. It is a tiara to which is affixed a veil, tulle veil trimmed in lace. On my straightened hair, no plaits this day, straightened hair with Shirley Temple curls. As I walk down the aisle of St. Pius Church with my hands in the prayer position, I'm the first in line because I'm the shortest in the class. The veil makes everything look creamy. But as I approach the altar and lift the veil, I see clearly. I see the body of Christ that I'm receiving for the first time. This Sunday is the Sunday I make my first Holy Communion. Yeah, you got it. I am authentically Black and unapologetically Roman Catholic. And those two things are as much a part of me as, well, breathing. And I never realized that it was an anomaly to many people until I went out into the work world as an adult. You see, I was raised in a home steeped in Afro-Caribbean and Catholic traditions. From kindergarten through the 9th grade, I was taught by the Oblate Sisters of Providence, the first permanent order of vowed Catholic women religious of African descent anywhere in the world. And my family, we prayed the rosary, ate dinner, and planned civil rights meeting all at the same time. Now, sometimes when I would hear a siren, I would make the sign of the cross and say a short ejaculatory prayer. And my prayer was that, well, if it was a fire engine, that the firemen would get there in time to save a life and put a fire out and save a home. If it was from an ambulance, that the paramedics would get there in time to save a life. And if from a police car, my prayer is now the same it was then, that the policemen are going there to save someone and not to hurt them. And I still pray my rosary and attend Mass daily. But a long time ago, when I was growing up, the Catholic Mass was said in Latin. All the hymns and the prayers were in Latin. And even after the rules were changed and the Mass was said in the language of the congregation, holy Masses, high Masses, special Masses were sung in Latin. The Requiem Mass, the funeral Mass, the Mass for the dead was sung in Latin. So on days during the week when there was a funeral, the 7th and 8th grade girls from St. Pius School would have to come to the church and sing the Mass. We would walk down the street of Harlem Avenue in West Baltimore in our pristine blue jumpers and our starched white blouses with the Peter Pan collars, hand in hand, 2 by 2, not making a sound, being very quiet, no running, lest somebody drop a dime on us and call the nuns and tell them we were acting up. As we walked past the white marble steps and approached St. Pius Church, we went up those tall steps, and before entering, we reached in our pockets and pulled out a white chapel cap made of lace that we affixed to our heads with a bobby pin so that our heads would be covered in the sanctuary. And when the Mass was over and our singing was over, we'd walk back to St. Pius School the same way we walked down. But when we got there, Sister Carmela, Oblate, Sister of Providence, was waiting for us with sweet treats and prayer cards. And she would tell us that what we had done was sacred, that our songs, and of course the incense, was there to lift the soul of the dearly departed to a wondrous eternal life with Christ. I was so proud to be a Black Catholic woman. I still am.
I'm buying long, thin Israeli scarves, purples and grays and greens and blues with silver threads running through them. My hair is long and thin too. I place my scarf in the center of the top of my hairline, tie it once underneath, pulling my hair up as if into a little hobo sack. I learn how to knot and wind the long ends in the current fashion to make a crown. My teacher says it is a holy act to dress for school each morning. My sleeves are long and button at my wrists, even though it is 85, 90, sometimes over 100 degrees late summer in Jerusalem. We don't have air conditioning in our apartment, and hardly anyone in our poorer neighborhood of Talpiot has mesh screens in the windows. That was high technology. So when we open them for a cross breeze, we get all the dust and all the bugs with the air. Eventually, we hang mosquito netting over our bed, which makes me feel like I'm living somewhere much more foreign, much farther away in my imagination than the country that my uncle always said was our homeland. The country my grandmother was born in, the countries my cousins live in, the country where I bought my tallis, my prayer shawl, that I wore to lead Hebrew prayers at Boston University Hillel, the country I return to now as a married woman to study and live for a year. But if Talpiot was foreign, then the neighborhood of Har Nof was another planet. It was for Har Nof that I buttoned my sleeves and tied my scarf. I couldn't wear my tallis there. That was only for men. So it wasn't going to be my prayer community, just my school. We got an apartment in Talpiot, and every day I took 2 buses to school, changing in the city center. Up the steep, steep hill past Angel's Bakery, where the bus would stagger and pause, and the smell of sugar and bread would fill us. Men in black hats and women in wigs would fill the bus as the neighborhood got more and more overtly religious Jewish. By the side of the road, if an ambulance went past, the children would call out Tehillim, Psalms of David, yelling prayers for the sick and the troubled. Serach's song. Joseph's brothers stripped his coat from him and threw him in a pit. Perhaps you know his story from the musical, Joseph and the amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Perhaps you know it from the Bible. Maybe you don't know it at all. In which case, let me just tell you, Joseph had 11 brothers and 1 sister.
10 of his brothers didn't like his dreams, didn't like his prophecies, or his attitude.
Let's face it, they were jealous of how much their father loved him. It got so bad that they beat him up, took his coat, his very special coat, and threw him in a pit. A camel caravan came by and carried him off into slavery.
Don't have doubt and never fear. The Lord your God is always near. Though the wind may blow and the sun may blister, you can hear his voice in a quiet whisper. He is alive. He is alive. Don't give up hope. Joseph is alive.
He might have been sold. He might have been kidnapped. Not clear. What is clear is that the brothers had the coat and no Joseph.
They slaughtered a goat, tore the coat, and dipped it in blood.
And brought it to their father Jacob to draw his own conclusions. torn, torn. My son has been torn by wild beasts.
Why is it darkest before the dawn and our troubles just seem to go on and on? Every day it's harder to break these chains and be free. Oh Lord, why is this happening to me? He is alive. He is alive. Don't give up hope. Joseph is alive.
Years later, the brothers are in Egypt, and there is their brother Joseph. He is second in command to the Pharaoh himself and administrator of the food they are begging for a famine ravaged all those lands. Joseph says to them, "Tell our father, I am alive."
This is where I stand my ground. In the place where Tamir Rice, Trayvon Martin, Freddie Gray's mother, Emmett Till's mother has stood. But for me, it is the grave site of not one, but two of my sons. On Christ, the solid rock, I stand. All other ground is sinking sand. So how did they end up, both of them, in the same place? It's an age-old story. Calvin Thomas Thompson was born to teenage parents after what the old timers called a shotgun wedding. 3 years later, Barry Ross Thompson was born. Let's face it, we were too young to be married, let alone have 2 children. God knows we tried. No, let me straighten that out. God knows I tried. But babies having babies, when one parent refuses to grow up, is a recipe for disaster. Now, I later married a man who loved me and my children. You see, my first husband had walked out on us, walked out on me and our children. But Paris loved me and my sons. But no matter how much we loved them, Calvin, the pain of having his own father walk out on him when he was just 5 years old was like an open wound that will continue to bleed and fester. Oh, there were good times, birthdays, Christmases, and that wound would scab over. But at the slightest disappointment, that scab would open up and fall off, and the bleeding would start all over again. My Calvin was smart. My Calvin was handsome. Women loved him and men envied him. But my Calvin was angry. Oh, he wasn't angry at me, and hard to believe he wasn't even angry at his biological father. Calvin was angry with himself for not being good enough for his own father to love him. And that self-hatred was his undoing. Even being tops in his class, he dropped out of college. He succumbed to drugs to dull the pain, depression, and then the diagnosis of diabetes. And drugs, depression, and diabetes makes one lethal cocktail. We found him. He had died in his sleep. His blood sugar was over 800, and there were drugs in his system. Now, Barry, he was the sweetest, cutest little fella you ever want to see. All he wanted to do was please everybody. He was smaller than his brothers, and he spoke with a stutter. But Barry stood head and shoulders above his peers, and in his attitude and his sympathy and generosity to everyone. He worked down at the church, and there was some talk about Barry becoming a priest. That's why it was such a surprise that after high school, Barry entered the United States Marine Corps. He buffed up, the stutter gone. He became the spiritual leader, and for his platoon, and he succeeded to the rank of Lance Corporal. But then President George Bush sent my Barry to war, Operation Desert Storm, looking for weapons of mass destruction that didn't even exist. My Barry was wounded. He came home, but he was never the same, in and out of VA hospitals, and he finally succumbed to his injuries. So here is where the mortal life of 2 of my sons ends. But here is where my life begins. I lost my children, but I found my God. You see, it wasn't like I didn't have any faith, but it's not until The grief of losing 2 children back to back put you in a place that you need God's help just to breathe. But when you have that faith come back, this strength put my faith into, how can I say it? Like the old folks say, that you know, that you know, that you know, that you know. So here's where I stand. I stand to be mother and mentor, not just to Calvin, Barry, and now Aaron, but to all African-American youth, to be their strength. I stand to protect our youth, our Black youth, from incarceration and drugs and depression and violence and a culture that treats Black youth lives at no value. Here is where I stand to turn my tears into my triumph, my anger into my action, and my pain into my peace. And I draw strength on my Black Catholic teaching, the teaching that tells me that death is not the end of life. Resurrection leads to eternal life. All other ground is sinking sand. My sons are alive. But how can Joseph's brothers tell their father that he is alive?
Yeah. It's not just their part in the deception, the betrayal, the violence. You know, even a very good news can shock an old man to death. Jacob had been mourning his son for over 20 years, and he was a very old man.
A parent's back is bent from carrying our woes. We shave our heads and rent our clothes. The years go by and still we grieve, praying for just one chance to believe. He is alive. He is alive. Won't give up hope. Joseph is alive.
One of the brothers, Asher, asked his daughter Sarah to sing a song. She was a very good singer. He asked her to sing a song for her grandfather to tell him Joseph was alive. She played that song.
Oh, she played that song.
She played it in her tent and outside.
Joseph lives, your son Joseph. He lives. He is in Egypt. He's powerful. He is alive.
She played it by the wells of water. She played it by the cooking fires. She played it in the fields. She didn't sing those words, but the song had those words. Joseph lives. Your son Joseph lives. He is in Egypt. He is powerful. He is alive.
A child will bring life to a world that's dying, so dry your eyes and stop your crying. Out of the darkness, the sun will rise to remove the veil from your tear-stained eyes. He is alive. Joseph is alive. Here is your hope. Joseph is alive.
That song, as the familiar things of home do, wound its way into Jacob's heart, strengthened Jacob's heart, until the day came when Sarah sat beside her grandfather and he asked her, "Tell me, what are the words to your song?" Joseph lives. Your son Joseph lives. He is in Egypt. He is powerful. He is alive. And Jacob said to the brothers, "Take me to Egypt." 1995-96, Israel. It was the years of the bus bombings. When we arrived in Jerusalem, my cousin taught us right away how to hear the difference between construction work, an airplane sonic boom, and a bomb. We created a template email so we could just hit send to tell everyone back home seeing the news that we were okay, or at least alive. Cell calls couldn't get through. Our friends let us know that the US State Department had issued one of those helpful warnings for citizens abroad. Americans should stay off buses and away from bus stops to be safe. Well, now we walk through the crowded urban streets pointing, "There's a bus stop, there's a bus stop, oh, look, a bus stop." I buttoned my collar, I tied my scarf, I took my 2 buses to school. I had my pick for the first one of whichever came first. Bus stops were so close together and traffic so bad, I could hover between stops and jog to just the right one once I saw the display number coming. But often I took number 18. Hebrew letters make numerical puns, and 18 is our most famous. It spells the word chai, which means life. If you've ever received a donation or a gift in multiples of 18, 36, 54, that's a Jew wishing you a blessed life along with the cash. We don't talk much about the afterlife. For us, this life is life. My Hebrew was bad. Even after most of a year in Israel and years of Hebrew school, really embarrassingly bad. The driver turned up the radio and everyone got still and quiet. I knew they were talking about a bombing on bus number 18. There had been one just last week at the central bus station, killed 26 people. The number 18 went through mixed neighborhoods, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Palestinian Arabs and Israeli Arabs, tourists and immigrants, poor people and homeless people rode that bus. It was a soft target because everyone fit in. Even me, all buttoned up, riding to seminary in Harnof. The urgency of the newscaster didn't seem like a retrospective, but it had been exactly 1 week, and it was definitely about a bombing and deaths and the bus and number 18. Traffic was horrible. The bus was hot. The fuel was diesel and smelled. No one was talking. That's not strange for an American bus, but for a Jerusalem bus, it's very, very wrong. I thought about calling my husband, but I imagined my loud English piercing the retrospective mood and didn't. I changed buses at the central bus station. I rode up the hill past the bakery. That bus didn't turn up the radio, but everyone was quiet and staring straight ahead, and everyone, I was sure, spoke Hebrew fluently and knew exactly what to do, everyone but me. So I sat. And then I got off at my stop, half a block away from the school, which is a tiny apartment in blocks upon blocks of white stone apartments jutting out like steps from the hillside, fronted by vines and flowers growing out of the desert stone. I climbed the long, narrow stairs. The apartment door was open, and the students were all gathered in the largest room, lined with books, double table down the center, crowded into a corner, swaying and chanting Tehillim, those Psalms of David. At this school, in this neighborhood, women didn't pray together without a quorum of men to lead them, but they were all praying together. I walked in the open door and they turned and rushed me. Someone took me to a landline and told me to call my husband. They had been unable to reach me, the one student who came all the way from the mixed and secular neighborhoods. Didn't you hear the news? I was late because of traffic. Traffic because the bus number 18, one behind mine, had been bombed that morning on Jaffa Street, minutes after my 18 went past. They had been praying for me. Most of those women weren't the hugging type, and I wasn't the hugging type, but my chavruta, my study partner, hugged me and held me, angular and awkward, and I think others did too. Certainly they nodded and wound around me like a hug, like a scarf, like a tallis, like a prayer. For some, it's been a hard year.
For some, it's been a hard 10, 20, 50 years.
And the news is hard. So hard sometimes we can't even figure out how to talk to one another.
Oh, but there is a song.
There is a song in our tents and outside, by the wells and the fires and the fields.
And in our neighborhoods, in the cities and the suburbs.
There are singers and there are young people just starting to write the verses to their songs, just starting to tell their stories. Those verses would become our story, the story of our people.
The world will surely breathe again, cleansing and wondrous like refreshing rain. A youth will lead us in a prayer and a song, and the greatest power will right all wrong. We will survive and we will thrive. Hold on to hope. We are alive.
Tell me,
Tell me,
what are the words
what are the words
to your
to your
song?
song?
Wow. Thank you so very much. This is really beautiful, heartfelt story. Wow, wow, I'm inspired. Okay, so now is the time where I invite all the storytellers to turn their cameras back on. And this is where I ask all the attendees to please share your thoughts. What stood out to you in the chat box? And if you have any question, please use the Q&A box to ask these questions. Thank you very much. So I will start. I mean, you can all turn your mics on. And I will start with Gloria. I was really inspired by the story of your mother and how patient she was. Can you share what was the point of view of your father?
I'd be happy to. My father was also a teacher, and he was a soldier, and he fought in Korea, and I believe World War II also. And when he came home, he suffered some of the same disrespect that a lot of African American soldiers, suffered. But he really felt that education, as Andrew said, was the key, that this was a battle and education was our best weapon. So he taught in a tiny, tiny little town in Virginia. And it was a segregated school, as most schools were at that time. But he took time after class or after school to teach his kids how to take tests and how to take them well for some of the state tests and things that they had to take. And his kids did so well, so consistently that that the administrators came down and they had to investigate because they couldn't figure out why Black kids were doing that well. They even accused him of cheating, but he wasn't. It's just that he took extra time. He built good relationships with his kids, and he really believed that education was the best weapon.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And I'll move on to Andrew. The story you told today was inspired by one of the stories of your book, correct?
Yes, that's correct. I had written a story called White Privilege in my book, and the purpose for the story was to educate my readers about what white privilege really is. Because frankly, there's a lot of white people out there who don't know what it is. And I was really upset because one of my readers confronted me about the story. He was saying that I was, guilty for being a white person and all this nasty stuff. And it's like,
Yeah.
it really wasn't at all that. It was really just saying that it's not about life being easy. It's about life being unfair to those who have to deal with the consequences of white privilege, and then it did talk about some of the issues in the story that I talked about tonight too. All about the program and the graduation and so on.
That will lead me to my next question for you is that you took a step and you stood out there and reached out for those who are in need. And despite the feeling of, hey, white privilege exists and you felt the frown at the beginning and you had to go above and beyond to help. What would your advice be for those who want to help but are nervous or apprehensive of being labeled a white privilege?
So, a couple of things. One is to try to engage with other communities. For me, I was able to engage with the Black community for years because of my, really because of my boss. I mean, he was African American, and he had me get onto the Black History Planning Committee, and so I was doing that for years. And he would take me to a lot of African American centrist events and things. So I engaged in the Black community and became comfortable. But I also learned that you can't help how people feel, and it's not about you personally. So if people understand that and they don't take it personally, they can reach out and try to accept, what's going on, do their best to help.
Thank you so much for your wisdom and your advice. My next question is for both amazing co-storytellers, Andrea and Janice. So you had a beautiful, long, cohesive, well-timed story. Please tell us about the process, how long it took you to work together. I understand that you have not met in person ever, but you have worked together extensively virtually. And please tell us, what did you learn about each other through working together?
Well, the pandemic brought us together. If you can make lemons out of lemonade, the pandemic had a way of introducing people who would never have met had we not had to have Zoom meetings and connect with people all over the world, actually. And Andrea and I hit it off right away without, I mean, it's obvious, like I said, I'm Black. It's obviously she's white, but that didn't define who we are. The outside of us didn't define the inside. And so we got closer as we worked. I'm on the planning committee for the Youth Standing Strong camp that Andrea leads, that directive. And the story, Thirok's song, actually was her idea, and then we collaborated on it. We put that together rather quickly, but then for this event, we worked extensively on interweaving our own personal stories that had to do with our beliefs of life and death.
So the quickly might be a little understatement. Serach's song comes from a Jewish midrash. It's the oral tradition that comes from behind the printed Bible. And so I was going to do something for the Assist Artists Standing Strong Together New Year's Eve show with that story. And I sent the bones of it to Janice, and she knew the biblical story, but not the Jewish tradition behind it, and did all this research and sends me back a song. And originally our idea had been that we'd tell two separate stories related to the theme. And when she sent me back her song, I said, how did you know that was a better written version of what I would have written for Serach's song? It's like, so we put that together in 3 days. And then, like Janice said, then going back and talking about what it meant to each of us. And that's where we discovered some of our differences. For Janice, this was a story of resurrection in a very real, very physical way for her. And for me, that was an incredibly foreign concept. And it had always been a story about communal survival, not individual survival, and what it meant to be part of a historic process as people. So through that, we started talking, like Janice said, about different views about death and afterlife. And then we discovered we had a bunch of the same childhood and young adult and mother experiences that we wouldn't have expected we had.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And my final question will be for Gloria. At the beginning of the show, Rick mentioned that the purpose of Story in Living Color is to start a conversation. So possibly not our kids, but also our grandkids, maybe our grandkids will have a better life. And I understand that you have 5 grandkids. So what is it that you teach them about navigating, this society and the current times?
Well, I try to teach them to do the best that they can and to learn everything that they can as well as they can. I teach them that life will not be fair, so don't expect it, but that they should try to be fair to everyone. And I guess, let me pull in a little bit about my book in here. My book is about a jacket, and a jacket is something that we kind of put on and take off. And, we don't think about it. But if the jacket could speak, it would speak kind of like the people who are the unseen or maybe the unappreciated a bit in our society. And I teach them to observe, to observe what's going on and fit themselves into it as best they can. And so that's kind of that's what I give them. And I hope that they, like the jacket, will learn that what their purpose is and what their best way to attain it is.
Thank you so very much. I will ask all the storytellers to turn your cameras off. Thank you so much for sharing your stories with all of us. We appreciate you greatly. There are so many amazing people to thank, and there are people who are upfront, the storytellers, me, the MC, and then there are people who work in the background. I would like to invite Dan to come on. He is the tech guy. He is the guy who's responsible from all the transitions, all the book covers, anything related with running the show smoothly is under Dan. So thank you, Dan, very much for running a smooth show. Another person to thank, and I know that she will be watching later. She couldn't make it here today because she has obligation, but she is Rocky Ross, Rachel Ross. She is an amazing storyteller, a coach, and she helped workshop with all the storytellers. Tonight she wrote the notes for everybody, and Rocky, I know you are watching. We thank you very much for your work. Big thanks for the Storytelling Association of California for putting such a program together that will help start a conversation. And finally, I'd like to thank you, the audience, for allowing us to do what we love. Thank you for purchasing the tickets. Thank you for donating so that we, storytellers, MC, can come on and share our art. You are giving us the platform. We hope that you continue to support us, and we hope that you continue to come to our shows, and we hope that you enjoy our company. From all the storytellers, from the tech guy, from the Storytelling Association, from Rocky, and finally from me, thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.